And on this week's In Focus session, we will be discussing whether you are reacting or responding to the world around you. And what I mean by that is we have two options basically. We react or we respond. And the difference between the two is something happens to us around us. Someone says something, a situation unfolds, something happens at work or at home, and we react with our natural instinct, right? So the reaction could be something's happened, I feel anger, now I'm angry. Something happens, I feel sadness, now I'm sad. Something happens, I feel joy, now I'm happy. And we go off of an initial reaction to what has happened around us, right? But we don't have to do that because we can actually choose, in the loose sense of the word, our response. And what I mean by that is we can have something happen that creates a feeling of anger, creates a feeling of sadness, of, stress, of happiness, of joy, whatever, of love. And we can actually respond in an according manner. And one of the quotes that's really probably one of the most powerful quotes I've ever read is from Viktor Frankl, where he says, between stimulus and response, we have the power to choose our response. Something like that. Anyway, you know what I'm like with my quotes. It's something along those lines. But what he's trying to say is that we actually, when we slow down what's going on with us, when we slow down what we're thinking in the moment, and we don't get caught up in our own personal thoughts around the situation that's happened, we can allow ourselves the time and space, and that space might only just be a few seconds, to actually take on what's happened, to actually see a situation, an event, something for what it is, and respond accordingly. And that response, more often than not always, sometimes it could be different, but can be different to the initial reaction that you would have taken. And all that you've done in that instance is to slow down your thinking within your own mind of what that situation means to you, what's occurred, what its significance is, whatever, so that you can respond in a different way. And an example of this is, I was working with a client the other week actually, and he was talking to me about, he will notice when certain thoughts will pop up, right? And it will then send him on a negative spiral. And this is when I first kind of posed this idea of reaction versus response, to him at least anyway. And I said, look, well, what do you think's happening in this instance? Are you reacting to the thoughts, or are you responding to the thoughts? And he was like, oh, I'm not sure. Responding maybe. I think it's probably a bit of both. I said, well, from what I'm hearing is you're having these thoughts and it's, causing some kind of stress around work or whatever it is. And you are allowing these thoughts to take over. So you're reacting to each thought that's coming in almost in an instant, right? Your instinct is to react to those thoughts as they come and the feelings that come with them. So it could be stress or anger or whatever it was. In this particular instance, it was like stress. And then we sort of sat with it for a while and we kind of explored a bit more of what that meant for him. And then I said, now, how would you want to respond to those thoughts? What would be the choice that you could have? If you could choose one, if you could select the response, what would it look like? And he said that, well, I guess I'd want the thoughts to just not stop, but just I'll be there, but without me wanting to believe them in a way. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you have the power to do that. And I relayed the Viktor Frankl quote to him. Between stimulus and response, we have the power to choose the way we want to respond. And he sat with it for a while and he was like, yeah, okay, I see what you mean. I can choose how I'm going to respond to these thoughts, to this situation. And I said, what? And we worked on it a little bit. Why do you think that is? And he said, because, well, I guess they're just thoughts, right? They're not necessarily real. It's just a thought that is then making me feel more stressed. And then the more I think about and continue to think about those thoughts, the more stressed I become. Whereas if I actually allow myself to step back, and that was a real key thing that he said, if I allow myself to step back, I allow myself to then see what's happening and I can respond differently. And at that point, I held my hand up and I said, do you know what? You've absolutely nailed that, because that's exactly what occurs when you slow down. You take a step back from what's going on. You take a step back from the situation. You take a step out of that moment that you're being caught up in. And by doing that, you actually become more present in the moment that you are now living in. And you can respond according to how you feel is best. You don't have to react off of that instinct. You can respond in a better way. For example, if someone says something to you that's not very nice, your instant reaction is probably to say something not very nice back to them, or, something along those lines, right? Maybe not necessarily that. But what I'm saying here is, if you take the time to step back from that, you can actually brush off that comment, laugh it off, and then just continue about the conversation or the day or whatever's going on. And your response has been entirely different to what your initial reaction would have been. So it's really important then that when you're looking at this idea of reacting versus responding and what they mean, the first initial thing that is so important when it comes to this is to recognize when it is happening, right? To take that moment, to recognize that moment when your reaction is instinctual, and when you can stop yourself, catch yourself, recognize it, catch it, and step back from the situation. That moment there that you've done that, you're pulling yourself out of that moment, like I said, and you're actually bringing yourself more into the present. You're bringing yourself more into your actual mind and body rather than just being caught up in your thoughts, right? So you recognized it. The second part of that is to accept that situation of what it is. See it for what it is. It's a comment, it's something that's happened, or something that's unfolded, or something that someone said or didn't do, or whatever it may be, right? Accept that situation for what it is. Once you can really accept that situation for what it is, you can then have a response which is entirely different from what your initial reaction would have been. You can then have a response which is founded in growth, which is founded in actually your inner kind of wisdom, or just being more aligned as a person rather than just going off of this, animalistic instinct that we have. And by being able to do this more often, the more you catch yourself reacting, the more you can stop yourself and catch yourself in that moment where you're going to react, what you're doing is you're creating more space between that stimulus and your response. And the more space that you create between the stimulus and the response, the more time, and again, this could just be milliseconds or seconds, but the more time you're building up for you to actually set back from that, what that thing is, and then see and choose and design the response which is the most appropriate for you. And that is when the magic happens. That space that you create, and like I said, the more you're able to recognize what the situation is and step back from it, the more space that you create, and the greater that space becomes, the more you actually allow your wisdom and your actual true sort of being and your true values to come through. Because often when we're caught up in these, quick thoughts, and we're caught up in the reactionary responses that we have, we're not really being ourselves. We're not really sticking to our values. They're very fight or flight defensive, or we get on the back foot and then we try and push back on the front foot, and we're just very reactive is the truth, right? Whereas when you step back from that and you allow yourself the time to actually create that space, to actually see what's going on, and then to design the response which you think is the most appropriate, then what you're doing is you're just allowing your wisdom to come through. You're allowing your values to really shine through. And that's when real growth occurs in life, when you're able to really recognize these situations happening and continue to build up and step back from those reactions and allow your response to be one that is more aligned with you as a person, with your beliefs, with your values, and with your wisdom and everything else. So I hope that you've, really been able to take something from this episode. I'd love to hear kind of what's been coming up for you personally as you've been listening to this or watching this. What are the insights that you've had? What are the things that you've learned? Are there any questions that you've had throughout this? If you have, then feel free to drop them in the comments down below if you're watching this on the video, or hit me up on my Instagram DMs at @IamAlexManzi. Shoot me over a response, because I always love to hear what you guys are thinking, and I always try my best to reply to every message and every comment where I can. So really let me know what you've learned from this episode, because I think this is a really powerful learning. I definitely started to see a huge shift with my client since we had that conversation a few weeks ago. He's really changed a lot of the ways that he's approached situations that have unfolded that were very similar to the situations which were causing him stress that we were speaking about. And she sent me a voice note about it saying, oh man, I feel like this has changed so much for me. I never realized this is what was going on. So just by understanding what's happening here and then trying to put these little things into practice in your life, you can really create like true, like huge shifts for yourself. So like I said, I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. Hit me up on Instagram DMs or drop a comment down below.